One of the things that's really interesting about what you're doing uh, is, you see so much, like you mentioned, GitHub Copilot and things like that, and that's a lot of, folks doing, like using AI to do even vibe coding and things like that. But you're focused on what's the bigger picture here, and I don't think not everybody entirely realizes how many artifacts there are in a large software development project, and how nearly impossible it is to keep everything in sync and produce all that too, right? I mean, can you talk about the incredible nature of sprawl in some of these projects?
Yeah, if you look at in open source land, I mean, you've got big projects like Chromium, for example, Linux, and so on. But those code bases are actually tiny compared to some of the code bases you find in the enterprise, where they're not 20 million lines of code, but 200 million lines of code. Where no engineer has any understanding of how all the pieces fit together, right? The best you can hope for is to understand your portion, your end of the world. And these code bases are vastly too large to pass as context to any AI model. It's very computationally expensive. It costs the square of the size of the code base to try to pass it as context. And for a large code base, there's just no way for the AI model to digest it. And so that was the problem we had to go off and solve. How can we take a monstrously large and complex, sophisticated code base, and how we teach the AI everything it needs to know in real time about that code base to accomplish the task at hand?
Yeah, I remember an anecdote from a coder that I knew who worked for a very large OS developer that I won't mention, but he said he came across a piece of code and it said, "You may think you know what this does, but you don't. Do not touch this." But I mean, there's a lot of things, even in like the biggest companies, you have this institutional knowledge that, doesn't get transferred. You have a lot of stuff that doesn't get documented properly, and it gets really hard to figure out what's going on.
Indeed. One of our early customers, Webflow, the chief architect had this epiphany because his senior leadership team spent a significant portion of their time, I think it was 25-30%, onboarding new hires and helping them discover how to be productive inside of their complex code base. And that's a substantial amount of senior architect time. And the ramp time is tough on the new hires, and they've got to queue up to ask their questions and so on. They found that Augment could deliver that mentoring 7 by 24 and do it as effectively or better than the chief and lead architects on the team. And so you had somebody that could give you a tour, help you understand the things that you were missing, might even look and say, hey, this documentation is inconsistent with how the software really works. Can I fix it for you? Or this code looks redundant. Can I delete it and reuse this code instead? So that ability to kind of get onboarded with much more help is transformative.
Yeah, I mean, one of the criticisms of AI has been that it's been focused largely in the sort of creative human work. It was supposed to take away the drudgery, but now it's doing all the graphics and the fun stuff that everybody wanted to do. Humans are being left to do the drudgery stuff. But I think that what's cool about what you're doing is you're really focusing on that drudgery stuff that is just way too much for people to, like handle, you know, or would they want to even live in that world where they have to handle all that?
There's so much redundant and tedious work associated with software development. All the time, we're now in this situation where a new class gets implemented, and then the engineer says to the AI, "Hey, go crank out a set of unit tests and run them, and let me know how it goes, and report back to me if there are problems, or if you find an issue, can you fix it?" So engineers have the freedom to stay involved in the areas that they care about. And usually those are the creative, inspirational tasks. AI doesn't have a vision today for how you want to evolve software, where you want to take it, what you want it to be capable of in the future. So that sort of longer term vision for the software is still very much the domain of human engineers. What we're delivering in AI is vastly reducing the friction between where you are today and where you want to go to. So, I'm actually really bullish about the software engineering industry because, I think when software becomes a lot more predictable and you can get all of the features you want and you can get them reliably, I think people will invest more in software rather than less. So even as we drive up productivity, I hope we'll have the need for ever more software engineers.
I've got to imagine this greatly accelerates a team, what you're doing.
We certainly see that. We see teams delivering 50%, 2x productivity, and it's only accelerating. So the models have gotten so much better, even over the past year. I think things really inflected with Sonnet mid-year last year in terms of it breakthrough in code understanding, and then you could give the AI a task that might take a human engineer 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and it could go off and complete it. Now we're up to an hour kind of task. And the AI is, ever more sufficient, at least ours is, because it has this deep understanding of the code base. So it can take on ever more complex tasks. And I think I don't see any reason that that's not going to continue to grow. But at the same time, we're very much about complementing human engineers, making them more productive, making their job more fun. Trying to take away the drudgery and the pain associated with evolving these tens of millions of line code bases.
One other thing too that you mentioned regarding this too is that there's the best code is code that you've already created that that works. And you mentioned sort of like surfacing redundant code, but the ability to identify a problem too and surface code that already exists for an individual so they don't have to go and find it or reconceptualize it too has to save an enormous amount of time.
Or, one of the problems with these naive AIs that don't understand your existing software is they're very good at proliferating code. So you start writing in a new class, they're very happy to keep adding ever more software into the code base. Augment's still one of the only AIs that will detect and say, hey, there's code in here that we could reuse, or there's redundant code in here that we could delete.
Right.
And that's software engineering nirvana is getting rid of code, not adding more code.
Yes.